maybe you can go back to early days, like early when you were younger, and some of your inspirations growing up, sort of the basis for the journey that you've been on.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, thanks Jack for having me. Thank you all for attending. That's an awesome way to walk into a room. I don't think I'm spoiled now. I'm not going to go into any room unless everyone just stands up and applauds now. It's going to be a rule of mine. I had no idea. What are you sneaking around for, Ray? I had no idea it was your birthday. Before we start, would it be okay if we all just sang Ray happy birthday? Would that be cool? Yeah? All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ray. Happy birthday to you. Woo! Yeah.
Audience like this every time.
So I think your question was sort of early experiences. You know what really amazes me is how much better and more qualified and more talented and more hardworking entrepreneurs I meet these days are than when I was growing up and when I was doing my first few startups. It's amazing. I was at this thing called LA Hacks down in UCLA a couple weeks ago. It's a big hackathon on the West Coast, and it was a recruiting event. And there were literally 12 and 13-year-old kids that were participating on this. And not just like, oh, I happen to take some programming course and I want to try out at this hack event. But literally these kids had shipped 4, 5, 6 apps in the App Store, knew Objective-C inside and out. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. And I think that isn't the anomaly anymore. That is the norm. It's just amazing how talented these people are. And I think it's also a bigger trend that we're seeing right now in technology, which is that products and services have never been this easy to build. And I like to kind of walk you through a quick history that will date me horribly. But one of my first jobs was at Microsoft. And one of my first products that I worked on at Microsoft was SQL Server 2000. And SQL Server 2000 was, at the time, one of the most well-run, well-executed on products that had ever launched at Microsoft. It launched early, which was pretty amazing at Microsoft. And ahead of schedule, less resources than we had originally thought. And the grand total was about 900 people, and it took 2 years to write SQL Server. Fast forward to another project that I got to work on, which was the launch of Hulu.com, which we did back in October of 2007. And Hulu, there was about 30 people that worked on that, and we did that in 84 days. And then fast forward again to this little company that when I was at Kleiner, I fought really hard to try to invest in, but ultimately lost out on the deal. But it was this little photo sharing site. Started by this guy, Kevin Systrom. You may know it as Instagram. But Kevin and Mikey and one intern, 3 people wrote Instagram in about 5 weeks. So in terms of the pace of innovation and how quickly amazing products and services can be built, it has just never been faster. So this is a long roundabout way of saying that I think the experience that I had, I'm forever grateful for them, and if there's anything that you guys can learn from it, I'm happy to share. But I think the takeaway will be that you're playing an entirely different game now. It's so much faster. It's so much more energetic and vibrant that the things that I went through are going to seem like really slow, boring exercises to you guys. So I'd almost discount a lot of the things that have happened in the past and really look for examples to around you in terms of the great innovations that are happening today. I think that's maybe a better model for you guys to be successful going forward.
So what got you into programming? Because back in the day, there wasn't this vibrant startup ecosystem, and you couldn't hear the stories of 13-year-old putting an app into the App Store and making $3,000. after coding a game and learning Objective-C over a weekend or something. What got you into tech as a kid?
Yeah, I've always, the person I've looked up to in my life more than anyone else has been my father, who was a chemical engineer, but decided he didn't want to work in a factory the rest of his life. So taught himself to write code and became a DBA. And he used to always tell me, Eric, you got to go sharpen your knife. And he had this great story about this a guy that was paid to go cut down trees. And the first day he went and he cut down 20 trees. And then the second day he went out and he only cut down 15 trees. So he's like, okay, I got to work harder, right? Got to get back up to 20. And the third day he went and cut down 10 trees. And by now he's like freaking out, like, oh my God, like I'm so lazy, I'm only getting worse and worse every day, what's wrong with me? So he goes to his dad and he's like, hey, I cut down 20 and then 15 and I'm now at 10. What's wrong? Do I need to work longer? Do I need to try harder? And his dad was like, did you sharpen your axe? So my father used to love to tell me that story, and I've always that's always resonated with me. And I think that's also what drew me to computer science, into software, because software is a perpetual game of sharpening your axe. Perpetual. I learned programming started off with Pascal and C and C++, and then moved up to Java. And the change of the innovation, the innovation of the platforms themselves has been evolving so quickly that a world-class programmer, that sort of came into their own back in the days of C and C++, and even Java, they're more and more relevant today because the platforms are incredibly different. You have different language sets, from Python to Node to Objective-C, but you also have very different constraints, because sort of back in the day with much less processing power, with non-managed languages, native languages, you had to do much more around memory allocation, around being very careful of threads. You had to do a lot of stuff. I mean, there was entire classes around malloc and alloc and how to do memory allocation. And today, you'd be wasting your time learning that stuff. Memory is free. Just use as much as you want. Garbage collector will come on and take care of memory management for you. There's just so many things that you don't have to do anymore. And in order to stay... Did everyone here reset your passwords? Everyone? I'm speaking in gross generalities because, of course, there's still cases where you need to go deep. But for a lot of application programmers, you just don't have to worry about those things anymore. And that's just a perpetual game of sharpening your axe all the time because the core technologies and the platforms that you build on are changing. It's like playing a game where the rules are changing every year. And I think that's really exciting. That's really interesting. You can never master the craft because the craft itself changes. So I think that's what really drew me to computer science and programming.
Microsoft bought that company.
Actually, another company that was a Microsoft subsidiary, a spin out from Microsoft, bought that company, yeah. But then, when you're in Seattle and you're in technology, there's pretty much two places that you go. You go to Microsoft, you go to Amazon. And there's not really much of a startup scene, at least not in the early 2000s in Seattle. There's a much better one now, but sort of back in that time, you kind of went to Microsoft, or you went to Seattle, or you drank coffee. That's about all you did. So I went to Microsoft, and it was a great time. The Microsoft that I joined back in that time was a very different Microsoft than it is today. This was a time when Microsoft was feared. It was like, oh my God, how can anyone topple Microsoft? How can anyone compete with this massive juggernaut that is Microsoft? And it's actually really strange to kind of to visit Microsoft now and talk to people that are there now. They're almost apologetic. They're like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm at Microsoft. It's a weird thing, but it's certainly not the Microsoft that I remembered. Yeah.
They were evil back then.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something to be said about being a little bit evil. Yeah. So, but I loved my experience there. It was a lot of fun.
Why did you leave? Did you have to start a Beijing again?
Yeah. So I was at Microsoft for I was in the Seattle headquarters for about 2 years, and was working with the research lab. And they said, hey, you're Chinese, right? I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm Chinese. That's pretty obvious. And they're like, well, that qualifies you to go to Beijing and work at the research lab in Beijing. Because they were just desperate to try to get people to move out to China and help them with the research work that was going on. The lab in Beijing was started in 1997. And I joined in 2000. I joined the research lab in Beijing in 2004 when it was about 7 years old. And when I joined, it was the best lab, definitely at Microsoft, and maybe one of the best research labs in the world. In fact, the MIT Tech Review called it the hottest research lab in the world. And I was, I had no, I'm sorry to say this, I had zero interest in moving to China. I really loved Seattle. I loved the outdoors. I loved the clean air. I loved to ski. Life was good. But I was so fascinated by the research lab. And I was just amazed, like, how could this little lab out in China, out in Beijing, China, be the best research lab in the world? Better than Cambridge, right? Cambridge. Better than Silicon Valley. Better than our Redmond headquarters, right? Better than MIT. It was the best research lab in the world. And that's what I wanted to come out and find. So I moved out here in 2004, and I joined the research lab, and it was just an amazing, amazing experience. But that's actually when I got the bug to do another startup. I was teaching a class at Tsinghua University on entrepreneurship, actually, and it was so invigorating, so sort of energizing to be in that room every day, to get to see these students, to work with them, to kind of feed off their energy. And that's actually what inspired me to say, you know what, it's time for another startup. So I actually started another company around the end of 2006, the beginning of 2007, and it was an online video company. We were building actually just pure technology at that time. It had a sort of a consumer-facing part of it, but the thing that we're building was much more around sort of online delivery, online video delivery, and making videos more interactive. So we were building a technology layer, and around the summer of 2007, we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do with it, whether we were going to raise some money, whether we were going to kind of go down, one path of maybe licensing technology to companies, or really trying to build out a consumer-facing aspect of it. And that's when the Hulu opportunity came up. So we ended up selling this company to Hulu in the summer of 2007, and that's when my adventure in living in China came to an end, and I had to head back to the States and be at Hulu for a couple years. But that was certainly one of the most exciting times of my life personally, was getting a chance to live in China and sort of experience entrepreneurship here. And one thing I'll say is that doing a startup in China in 2007 was nothing like this. This didn't exist. This room, this did not exist. This energy, this vibe, this all of you entrepreneurs, this type of co-working space, it didn't exist. It is so awesome actually to see this now, just to kind of talk in the crowds and hear about all of these really awesome startups that people are working on. It's amazing. You guys should pinch yourselves, really. It's such a fun thing that you get to have. And I couldn't be more envious that you guys get to do this. In 2007, it was kind of, you're kind of the weird person for not going to Microsoft or Google. When we were trying to recruit out of China, my best recruiting pitch was that if you come work for me at the startup, and if you don't like it after a couple months, 6 months, I will get you a job at Microsoft. That was literally my recruiting pitch. That's the only way I could get people, because they're like, all they wanted to do was go work at Microsoft or Google or one of these other companies. But to see this energy now is just really amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to use that. Can you expand a little more on the process of starting a startup back then? Like, how do you find co-founders here, especially in that sort of environment, ready to take the plunge?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of founders. Well, I would say that there's sort of multiple levels of team building. The co-founder one is really, I would say, the most personal journey. I would be mistaken to try to prescribe a way to find co-founders, because I don't think that there is like a really strong way to do that. Often it's a great friend, often it's just a stranger off the street that you have chemistry and passion with. I think that's just very much a personal decision that you have to do on your own, because your relationship with your co-founder will be something that is the absolute bedrock and foundation of the company, and it's just really hard to prescribe that. So around co-founders, it's just something that you have to do on your own. And for me, it's usually been around close friendships. That's just been the way that I've done it in the past. But I think that for other people, they've done a lot of other things that has worked for them as well. But I've just found that has to be a very personal journey that you go on. The founding team, though, is very different. I think that is something that is far more sort of, you can prescribe that, and you can kind of go through a checklist to figure out how to build out your first team. And I've got a couple of things that I've learned and sort of observed in the past that I think have been helpful. At least I hope they'll be helpful. The first is that it's hard work. Recruiting is hard work. It is not something that just like comes naturally, or you just like stumble upon it. People are always asking like, maybe if I put my startup in this part of town, or in this city, or in this country, like great engineers or great business people would just like fall out of the trees and come join the company. There is no shortcut to it, nowhere. There's no like mysterious land of untapped engineering talent. It doesn't exist. It really doesn't. So all of you just give up on that and just admit that it's hard work. And I think that will just make life easier. It's just really hard work. So your job as CEO, as a founder, your number one job is to build out your team. Truly, that is what you do. It is not your number 2, 3, or 4 job. It is not something that you kind of get to when you have a couple of minutes to kill. It is your number one job. So make sure that you're acting that it is truly your number one job, right? So that's lesson I guess 1 and 2. Hard work, make it your number one job. Next lesson is that index far more on culture fit. Index far more on potential. Don't worry about their skill set. Don't worry about background. Don't worry about their expertise. The biggest reason is that I would say that there's a 90% chance that what you think you're working on will actually be completely different a couple of months from now. So if you were working on some big data problem and you really needed Hadoop experts, and you got world-class guy that has done nothing but Hadoop for the last 20 years, there's a good chance, just remember this to yourself, there's a good chance that 6 months later you'll be doing something completely different, and you'll need a dev that can do image processing. And if you got a guy that only knows one thing, he's actually going to be a terrible fit for you going forward. So just remember that, in that if what you're doing is going to fundamentally change, there's a very high likelihood of that, then what you mostly need is somebody that is a great culture fit, that has high potential, and it's really not about their background or their skill set today. That's another thing that I think is often lost on folks. And then the last thing is that it's really the referral network. There's nothing more powerful than that. Flipboard is a good example. We're about 140 people, and we do lots of studies and sort of look at the data about where we're recruiting from and how we're growing the team. 60% of our hires are from referrals. 60%. And I think that's a pretty good ratio. When I kind of survey across the valley and other companies, you want to be at over half. You want to be at over half your employees are from referrals. So every time you bring someone into the company, you should be asking, hey, who are 10 new people that you could introduce me to that we could potentially go off and hire? It's like part of our new hire onboarding process. Like, come in, sign some paperwork, get their computer set up, and then sit down with me and let's go through your LinkedIn. I mean, it's just like, that's your first day. We got to go figure out who is on your network that we could go and tap. I don't think that people do that enough. And if they do it, it's kind of very informal. Sort of like every once in a while they're like, hey, do you know somebody that's a designer? as opposed to like an everyday thing, really tapping that network, really going after that, because there's nothing more powerful than a referral network and building out a team. So those are just some very high-level rules that I've found to be successful throughout the years.
Can you talk a little about your experiences at Hulu? I mean, that was sort of a unique startup experience, right? Because it was funded by a bunch of big media companies and spun out of your startup in Beijing.
Yeah. So Hulu was in every way a startup in terms of small team, very hardworking, incredibly scrappy and frugal. Tight, close-knit culture. It was in every way a startup except for one way. And this one way is actually the most important way, that it was not a startup. Hulu was not a startup in a traditional sense because there was never any question about the product market fit. We never doubted that if we built Hulu, we would have users, because we knew that there were tens of millions of people watching Family Guy, 30 Rock, Daily Show, How I Met Your Mother, all these great shows. And we knew that if we just distributed them on another screen, there would be tens of millions of people lined up to watch those. So that was the most distinguishing factor about Hulu that made it not a startup. And I think that it was really a great education experience for me, because if you go through that a few times in terms of going through companies that don't have that product market fit risk, you really take for granted how hard that is, and you really forget that as a early stage startup, that is the only thing that matters. That is the only thing that you're thinking about from a product and business perspective. So often, whether through investing or advising, we'll meet a lot of entrepreneurs that are already thinking about, we got to figure out how to scale to, handle 4,000 requests per second. We got to, get our cost per MAU down to 3 cents. They're thinking about all of these long-term scale and reach and performance issues, when their number one problem should be, we got to get one person to love our product. And then after that, we got to get 2 people to love our product. And then after that, we got to get 3 people to love our product. And that's it. So I think that was the biggest thing that was missing about Hulu, but I think also the most important lesson of any early stage startup experience is, how do you find product market fit? How do you go and look for it? How do you change and adapt? How do you obsess about it? And as a early stage startup, make sure that you never lose sight of that. Never lose sight of anything other than product market fit until you know you have it. You have to have product market fit before you earn the right to go work on other things.
So Hulu sort of came out of nowhere, as I remember. It launched, and then it sort of had all this exclusive great content, and then all of a sudden everyone knew about it. What was it like in the company at the time when you guys, hit the news, you guys launched, and you guys were a success?
The early days of Hulu were actually terrible. It was because there was a lot of inertia that had been started by Fox and NBC before sort of our team got in place. One thing to remember, sort of the timeline of Hulu, is that Hulu was officially founded on March 17th of 2007. That's when Jeff Zucker and Peter Chernin from Fox and NBC signed a joint venture to put the company together. And then they assigned a lot of their key execs and lieutenants to start building out Hulu. And our CEO, Jason Kyler, didn't get hired until July 9th, about 4 months later. And my company didn't get acquired until July 15th is when I started. So about a week after Jason got hired, the first thing he did was he flew to China and he bought my company. It's actually, literally, he got into the office, like put his bags down on his desk, and then hopped on a plane and flew to China. So when we got there on July 15th, there was actually a lot of inertia that the media companies had put into place. And what they had put into place was actually not the company that we wanted to build. They felt that what Hulu should be is a licensing conglomerate, sort of a holding company, a company with full of lawyers like yourself. That would be the core asset of the company.
So sorry.
So when I got there, they had actually outsourced everything. Every part of the company had been outsourced. I joke that, well, I joke in hindsight, but this is true. Hulu had 2 separate PwC entities working for it. Imagine a startup that hired 2 separate PwC firms to go do stuff for them. Like what startup does that? What startup actually goes and hires 2 different groups of PwC consultants to actually go build things for them? It was crazy. So for the first month, I literally spent every hour of the day firing people or getting out of contracts. And you know, for any of you that have managed teams and have dealt with personnel issues and sort of had to back out of contracts, it's like the worst thing to possibly do. You know how fun it is to hire someone? Firing someone is the complete opposite of that. It is the complete negative of hiring someone. It's terrible. So it was just a month of just really, soul-sucking work to kind of unwind what had been started so that we could point Hulu in a very different direction. Because what we wanted to be with Hulu is that we wanted to be the world's best video distribution and monetization platform. We didn't create content. We didn't make shows. We're not screenwriters and not actors. But at the same time, Fox and NBC and these great studios, they don't know how to transcode video and work with CDNs and do multi-bitrate streaming and figure out codec profiles and do ad targeting. They shouldn't have to worry about all that. So that was where our partnership would lie. Our value add would be in being a great distribution and monetization platform, and their value add would be telling the best stories in the world. That was what we felt that we could offer value. So in the early days, in order to achieve that mission, we really had to kind of unwind the clock and back up Hulu to sort of ground floor so we could start building it again. And that also actually involved undoing the names. So I'm probably going to get in trouble for sharing this, but I don't care. The 2 names that were the leading candidates for Hulu were Cream and Stash, which I felt were like the worst names ever. Somewhere between like porn site and drug paraphernalia site. That's kind of what I thought we were building. So we even had to unwind the name. And
you sure you wanted Family Guy, not some other video on the site?
Yeah, actually, funny enough, after we started, someone had bought and trademarked the name Screwloo to do like the porn version of Hulu. I don't know if it ever launched, so you guys can check it out if it has. I don't know.
Anybody here know Screwloo?
Anybody know any Screwloo users out there? But it was sort of not just building in those early days of Hulu, but sort of unwinding a lot of the work that had been done. So it was the building was the night job, the unwinding was the day job. So that's why the first month was really exhausting. But once we got to like kind of back down to ground level, it was fantastic because again we could build we had raised $100 million. We could build with a ton of money in the bank, with no concern about product market fit, or not concern, but sort of no existential risk about product market fit. And we could really focus on just world-class product and engineering. It was so much fun to go do that. And when we launched on October 29th of 2007, we actually we launched in private beta. So that was kind of like that's the hot trick these days, is to like launch in private beta. So you make it feel exclusive, and then you can harvest demand and get people to sign up, and you kind of slowly let people in. It's a great thing. But we actually launched in private beta because literally the code was so crappy that, well, we could barely handle the users, or so untested that we could barely handle the users. So it was a lot of kind of fixing things on the fly to flesh out the feature set and the technology. But I think we knew we had something when we had betas, and then we use it for recruiting events. We'd go to schools and we'd actually hand out beta cards in order to recruit people to Hulu, and it would have a little code that you could put on, and we were kind of printing out like 500 cards at a time and letting people on slowly. And we knew that we had something special when we saw those beta cards getting sold on eBay. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, maybe here's a business model right there, is that we just like stay in beta forever and just like sell these cards on eBay to make money. But that's when we knew that I think that we were onto something special.
Was it challenging to come in as a tag team and integrate with a bunch of media people who are experienced they don't feel but maybe not so much about tech, and then basically telling them what they've done up to that point is all wrong?
Yeah, it was certainly a constant, give and take, and it started first. I'd say that the biggest conflict was actually culturally, because when you think about the actual day-to-day work, the media guys, I don't tell them how to write scripts, and they don't tell me how to write code. So it was actually a pretty simple partnership. Like, we knew what we did well, but it was really the cultural aspect of it that was very odd and strange. Like, when I first started, they had carved out my office, and it was maybe the size from this wall to like that's where the second floor starts. It's like the biggest space I'd ever seen. It was crazy. That was my office, right? So the first thing, and I never sat there one day. We turned it into we actually put up some walls and turned it into a couple of conference rooms.
Okay, so after Hulu, you went to Kleiner Perkins, right? So why did you leave Hulu, and then why did you become a venture capitalist?
I'd say there were 3 key moments that led me to leave Hulu. The first is that I got a call from Jerry Yang, who was still at Yahoo at that time, and he wanted to chat. We had some friends in common, and he actually asked if I would go run Yahoo Search, which was, I don't know, kind of interesting, just because as a technologist, search is like the creme de la creme of engineering projects. It's like a really fascinating engineering project. But ultimately, I just didn't want to go to a big company like Yahoo. But we ended the conversation, sort of on very good terms. I flew up to Sunnyvale and met with him. But when we left, he said, shame we're not going to work together this time, and maybe we'll find something to do in the future. But no matter what, you have to move to Silicon Valley. Like, you just have to. Like, you call yourself a technologist, but you've never been to the Valley, you've never seen the Valley, you don't understand the Valley. I don't think you can honestly call yourself a technologist until you've at least experienced it. And that was like the start of it. I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's right or not, but at least I'm feeling pretty nervous about it. So that was certainly one part of it. The second thing is another meeting that I got to have, which was with Vice President Al Gore, who's a partner at Kleiner Perkins. And Al is my ultimate hero. I love the guy. I'm just so amazed by him. And I was so personally passionate about clean tech and about green tech. And getting to hang out with Al, he was the one that was sort of like, hey, if you're really excited about clean tech, come work with me, and I will show you everything there is to know about clean tech. And I was sort of like, holy crap, that's kind of like pretty interesting too. And it got me really thinking about making a move. And then the third thing is something that it took me a long time to realize, but when I did realize that, I knew that it was the right decision, and that was that Hulu was no longer a technology company. I think Hulu had been a great technology company for 3 years, but 3 years into it, it had started to shift to become a media company, and at this point it is 100% a media company. And I define the difference between technology and media, technology company and media company is that, or actually between a technology company and any non-technology company, is that at a technology company, you are successful or not based on the quality and execution of the product and technology. Pretty simple, right? So if you build an awesome product with great technology, you have a shot to be successful. And if you don't have a shot to be successful. But what happened at Hulu was that the technology and the product became very much second to the content and the content rights and the content licenses that we got. And I found myself spending all my time negotiating content deals. A good example is that when we launched the iPhone app of Hulu, we built it in about 3 months, the iPhone app, but it took me 9 months to go out and get the rights. So after we were done, it sat on a shelf, we didn't touch it, In fact, when we finally had the rights, we had to go back and like fix a lot of the code because they had changed a bunch of stuff about like the video playback control. They had introduced HLS at that point in time. We had to like swap out a bunch of our backend. So we had built the app sort of so it had sat on the shelf for so long that the platform had changed while we were waiting to get the rights. And going through that experience was sort of very crystallizing for me, and realizing that, you know what, the technology comes second. What comes first is to do world-class business and content negotiation around great rights. And that's super exciting for a group of people, really. I take nothing away from that. In fact, in 2011, 2012, you know, I think that the heroes of Hulu were the content licensing team. They did amazing, amazing deals, but as an engineer, that's not really what got me excited. So those three things kind of, for me, decided that it was time for a change. And you know, I'm so glad that I had a chance to, and I'm still there, that I've been in the Valley. It's truly a really phenomenal place.
And you really hate lawyers.
just media lawyers.
Okay, well, so we don't have much time left, but I wanted to give you a chance just to touch on Flipboard and what you are doing there, and then maybe we'll take a couple of questions for that.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. Now, I don't want it to be a sales pitch. I'll give you the 30-second on Flipboard. Flipboard, we're building the world's best personal magazine. Imagine if you had the entire editorial staff of Time Magazine, of Fortune, of the New York Times, creating a magazine just for you every single day. That's what we're trying to build at Flipboard. We have about 130 million users worldwide. Half of our users are actually outside of the US, and outside of the US, China is one of our top 3 markets. So we're very focused and interested in doing a lot of great things in China. We actually have a product and engineering team here focused on this market, and I will be coming back often to work with that team, and I hope that I have a chance to run into you guys often.
Great. Anybody have any questions?
A lot of times about market fit. So how can you tell if you've achieved market fit?
Yeah, product market fit. So the key to product market fit is you have to have users that love your product. That are, you know, like Net Promoter Score basis, it's like 100, right? They're just jumping at the bit to talk to other people about your product. Having people that like your product, it's not enough. It's really not enough. You have to have people that absolutely love your product. So obsess about that. It's far better to have 100 people that love your product than 1,000 people that like your product. So make sure that that resonates with them. The second thing is that it has to be a repeatable activity. You know, on the mobile side too, it's sort of, we call them daily digital habits. On the mobile side, the bar for having daily engagement is actually so much higher than it was back on the website, which sort of measured in terms of monthly engagement with the site. But the idea that it needs to be repeatable. So something that people love and that they're going to actually go back and use repeated. I think those are the 2 hallmark signs of product market fit. And focus on that. Focus far more on engagement, focus far more on the core group of people that love your product, and less on the growth side. The growth can come later. The growth you can actually engineer. The growth you can fake, you can buy, you can do a lot of things, but you can't fake love.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. We'll have the venue open for